Welcome to another episode of the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Today, my guest is Clifton Roberts. He is a Silicon Valley executive with Intel Corporation, a civil rights leader, an animal rights activist, an environmentalist, and an experienced board member of not-for-profit corporations. Clifton is a citizen politician and ran for U.S. President and U.S. Senate from California. He is a frequent international and national speaker and writer on the subject of non-human animal rights and seeks to end the inhumane, scientifically indefensible, and economically unsound exploitation of other species by humans. Stick around. I want to introduce him to you. Hi, Clifton. How are you? It is such an honor to meet you.
Likewise, Nancy. Well, I know it's weird because I definitely know you. We've actually worked together virtually. I've written some stuff that was included in your publications, but it's so great to be here as well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you were the cover of one of my New Mexico vegan magazines when you were running for U.S. President. And I believe that we're also in the upcoming book by the wonderful Joanne Kong, Vegan Voices.
Absolutely. Yes, that was great. I wrote an article or an essay called The Hearts of Nations. And it talks about the fundamental right of us as human beings to live in a healthy environment. And so it talks about best practices, and I talk about my appreciation for this country and the Constitution and how awesome it would be if that was a right that was written into the Constitution, which was a right to an environment free from, the trees being cut down and animals being tortured and murdered, and that leading to greenhouse gas and all this stuff. So it was great. And it was good to see that you're in it, and just so many other heroes that we admire also in that book. So yeah, hats off to Joanne Kong.
Yes. And I would like to ask you, how did you come to veganism?
Yes, great question. So I grew up, my mother's Korean, my father is Black, and, all over the place, military, and had exposure to a lot of good food. So the practice for me was my mother always making tofu. In Korean, it's called dubu, but tofu and kimchi and rice and, things like that. And Koreans are very famous for, as a side dish, all of these vegetables, soybean sprouts, which we call kognamul in Korean, right? But I always was diagnosed by humans who read a lot of other books that were called medical practitioners with this thing called asthma. And, the few times that I can recall being taken in the ambulance, almost dying, it was an asthma attack. And then when I got into my teens, you had my acne. And then when I hit 30 finally, Mary Lou Henner had a book called Total Body Makeover or something like that. But she focused on veganism. And one of the things she said was the milk of a cow by genetic design is designed to turn its 40-pound calf into a 2,000-pound beast in less than 2 years. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, And I had shared with you the story about when I was 5 already. This thought was introduced in my head. So I tried it. And 2 weeks later, Nancy, I threw away my inhaler, my skin cleared up, and I never looked back. And I truly attribute it to living a vegan lifestyle. And of course, it was very selfish reasons, my own health. But as I tried to convince other people that were close to me, my family, which of course, that's, as you can imagine, that's difficult. One of the most difficult things we have to do as vegans. And it was just hard. And I learned about the animals. But yeah, that was my journey to veganism.
If you don't mind, can you share the story about when you were 5 years old?
Yes, absolutely. My mother used to make a very delicious Korean dish called bulgogi, and it was made out of beef. And I asked her at 5, and it's very vivid, Mommy, what's this made out of? And she told me, a cow. Well, at 5, I had met dogs, rabbits, chickens, turkeys, pigs, and I had met a cow in person. I'd seen it and touched it. I'd seen her and him and touched him. And so I was horrified as a child. But when she wasn't looking, I would because it was whatever she seasoned it with, which is usually trying to season it like a plant or spice or something, right? It was just delicious, and I would chew the flavor out of the flesh. And when she wasn't looking, throw it in the corner behind the curio cabinet. And ultimately, she found it because that's just rotting flesh, right? But yeah, anytime she would serve meat, I would realize that I was eating an animal. And I was so torn. And it's one of the reasons why even when I got to Cal Berkeley, I met these Hare Krishnas, and they were another force that introduced compassion. They started talking to me about it. And I'm like, oh, I need to go vegetarian. I had not known about dairy, what the effects of dairy was until Mary Lou, just drove it home for me.
And that is such a great story.
Sure.
When you're a child, you don't know because your parents tell you what you have to do. And sure. Their parents told them. So there's really no fault anywhere. It's just society. This is the way it's been, and it continues to be until someone speaks up, other people hear, and start questioning what's happening. And that's what veganism is.
Absolutely.
And the movement of veganism. Sure. And so,
Great.
I have similar stories when I was a child where veganism, the thought crossed my mind, but still it never really caught on to me. I didn't really make the total connection until 8 years ago for me. So I totally understand that.
Yeah. It'll be 54 years this. I'll be 54 this year, but it'll be 24 years.
Wow.
This year. And you mentioned child. Even if you think about as parents and as adults who are responsible for not just our own children, but other children to make a better future. The fact that we refuse to share with them how our food is obtained, right? You and I can say, I have this garden right over there, right? All sorts of stuff. It's so fun to see my 3 and 4-year-old look and see these huge cucumbers or, squash. You water them all day and they just get really big, right? And I get to tell them, this is how it's grown. This is how grapes are grown. That apples comes from there. But to have them think about what happens to the chicken that you hear in the back, you hear this chicken, right? We have like 8 chickens back there that we take care of. To put them through seeing them be slaughtered is just, it's unthinkable, right? And that's why we hide how factory farming produces food. It's just an insane thought when even the term, we live in a country, I remember giving the concession speech for when I ran for president, and we live in a country where the term slaughterhouse is a comfortable reference. Think about it, the term slaughterhouse. I had someone come here because we take care of all sorts of animals here, and this one lady, she was saying something, and I go, oh yeah, you're talking to the wrong person about the treatment of animals. I go, do you eat meat? And she, because she claimed to be this animal person, and she loved dogs and she loved cats. Do you eat meat? Well, you have some work to do. You do. So.
And you mentioned, and I mentioned that you ran for U.S. president and also for U.S. Senate, for a senator from California, sorry. And I've been trying to introduce more people to the fact that we need to go a step further. Sure. It's not just about eating vegan and advocating for veganism. Now we have to get people into politics, and whether local, state, national, that have the same views as we do and can help further veganism in the places that we need this concept to start growing, because this is where the laws are made, regulations are made. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I wish I could probably spend an hour with you on this, Nancy, but it's no secret that the most profound social justice wins of our time took place in politics. The abolition of human slavery, women's right to vote, and civil rights all became law due to political pressures. So to your point, I encourage any vegan to step outside of their comfort zone And, whether it's volunteering to help grow political parties or actually running for office, governorship, state legislators, city council. You mentioned you have a friend running for city council. I ran for U.S. Senate, and people tell me, why did you run for president? Why not mayor? Well, who's to say I'm not going to run for mayor? But running for president gave me a tremendous amount of experience about how it is to run at the federal level. It gave me a tremendous amount of exposure. I mean, I would not have met you had I not run for president, right?
Right.
So go out of your comfort zone. Try to grab your dreams. Try to chase your dreams, but more importantly, be unselfish and think about the people that people say animals are voiceless. They're not. They have voices. We just choose to ignore them.
Exactly. And I think that vegans are in a civil war right now, kind of, except that instead of trying to save and stop the exploitations of humans, we are doing so in the case of animals. Although I still say that veganism is a social justice movement because it does affect not only the animals, it affects the planet, it affects people.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you said it's a civil war because there was an article that I wrote for Veg News magazine. I'll send it to you, but I talk about the Civil War and this quote from James McPherson, where he writes, the Civil War started because of the uncompromising differences between the free and slave states over the power of government to prohibit slavery. And that's what the Humane Party is all about is, we've spoke to the hearts of people. We've spoke to the logic of people, and it still doesn't work. And no one wants to get it because of culture, habit, and tradition. And so we are proposing to introduce laws. And in some cases, it's going to get, when you try to talk about food, quote unquote, people are going to be very defensive.
And I also think that we need to get money out of politics, meaning that the politicians should run on a people kind of campaign where people donate and not big corporations who have interests. And then they're looking for you to make their interests, if you get elected, your focal point.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's one of the things I appreciate about the Humane Party is it's an all volunteer organization. The candidates and even the people that are elected to serve on the board of directors, they refuse, PAC contributions from companies. And, what was wonderful, Nancy, was we had Robert Mason, who, because when I ran, he heard about the Humane Party, he ran in Texas, and then we've had other people run for local office. So we just need to give Humane Party is very young, but we've formed relationships with sister parties and things like that. So I'm still supportive of it, even though that there's many challenges, as you know, Nancy, too, convincing vegans that voting a quote unquote third party is in their best interest. It's very challenging.
And anyone, because I think that we are all under the false pretense that there's only Republicans and Democrat parties. And there's so many other parties to also consider, depending on what your views are. And every time that we just choose to just do one party or the other and not give Humane Party or the Green Party or whatever other party that is that would work better for our society a chance, we lose.
Yeah. It's interesting because if you go to the national website for the Democrats, I think they refer the word animal, if you do the Control F and it searches for a word on a page, the word animal appears one time. And if you go to the Republican national website, the word animal doesn't appear at all. If you go to the Humane Party's website and you do a Control F and you search for animals, it's like 47 occurrences of the word animal. So you can just tell, even in the platform, It's one of the reasons why people say you should run for Democrat, under a Democrat thing, right? And I go, I could, and I could compromise, but the platform itself doesn't. It's not something that I would champion. There are elements of it, I think that I would champion, but overall, one of the most important issues is protecting animals, because I think that is connected to so many of the other issues that we just can't get. I mean, how are we going to learn to treat women equally, or Black people equally, or Hispanics equally, if we can't even figure out how to just treat the most um, defenseless and innocent beings on the planet? We haven't figured that out. So there's no way that I'd be able to be a champion, a gladiator, and step in the ring and battle for a platform that won't even give recognition to one of the most important social justice issues of our times.
It's like that saying says, an injustice to one is an injustice to all.
That's right.
And we are so all interconnected. I mean, look at the people who don't want to believe in climate change, and then look at the news. Every day I look for this, and it's floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, all this kind of earthquakes that affect people, that displace people. I mean, that's why I say that veganism is a social justice movement rather than just a diet.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's interesting because I've lived in California since 1984. I moved from Okinawa to come and live with my father so that I would be here. And when I first got here, it was not as hot as it is now. Like, I live in Sacramento area, and we're seeing temperatures in the 114 degree range. And when I first moved to California, at 16, it was never that hot. And think about it. I mean, if in 30 something years or 40 years, it's got this hot, it would probably be 105, maybe at the hottest, right? But 114, so you have 10-degree rise in just my personal experience. I'm not a scientist, but I'm a very logical person. And if that happens over the next 200 to 500 years, what's going to happen to my great-great-great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren? So
I know, I have a grandson, and I worry about the life that he's going to have to live in, the life that he's going to have, because the planet is changing and people are not caring about what is actually happening because they're too selfish. I mean, because they think that, oh, this is my right. However, they forget that a right should be where you don't impose danger or suffering or torturing to someone else.
That's right.
Otherwise, it shouldn't be.
That's right. I 100% agree. Yeah. And we have to start talking to people at their level. Like, some of the people that I've been able to help convert to even consider being a vegan or plant-based is, I tell them, like, that what you're eating is of the same makeup as your own bicep. My acronym for MEAT, MEAT, is muscle and epinephrine of animal tissue, MEAT. Because that's what you're eating, is the muscle of a being that was frightened beyond anything it could have imagined. And all of these, hormones, adrenaline, epinephrine, was injected into its body so that it could try to run. And there's no amount of cleansing of that flesh that we can do as human beings to prepare. You are ingesting not only the death and torture and mutilation of a being, mother, a father, a sister, or a brother, but it is of the same type of makeup that makes us move,
Cannibalism.
And it's just like, it has all these hormones just filled with fear. And you wonder why you have people that just treat other human beings with complete disregard, complete lack of empathy. I use economies of scale. If you had one island where all of America was on one island, let's just say it's 100 people, and you had another island And you, Nancy and Clifton lived on this island where we just like, oh, let's go pick this apple and grow some green beans and this and that. And oh my goodness, here's some spices and everything is just good. And the way we'd be able to think versus just turmoil over on this side. People see some pigs, and they just and just kill it in front of everyone, and it's screaming. The pig is just screaming, and blood's everywhere. And there's no doubt in my mind that that island would just destroy itself. The people would just destroy themselves.
Well, that's what's happening in the world right now, because we are the minority at the moment. But at the moment, because I say everyone else is pre-vegan, one way or the other, they're going to have to come to veganism if they want to survive, ultimately.
Yeah. So, that's a good view. I love that.
Yeah. Well, Clifton, thank you so much for being on the Vegan Pulse. I surely appreciate you. And I always keep tabs on what you're doing, because I would love for you to be the president one day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. And for everyone's listen, thank you as well.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Follow us on Facebook, like us too. Check out our website and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.